Hello, listeners, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Voices of Impact by TALRadios, powered by Touch a Life Foundation. Join us for insightful conversation with social entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers as we explore their journey and the impact they are making in the world. Micah chapter 6, verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. This profound biblical quote is apt for shedding light in geopolitical learning opportunities for biblical advocacy and leadership. The acronym for it is GLOBAL. Global Justice is an organization with extraordinary vision to inform, impact, and inspire generation to learn, lead, and pursue justice. Today, we have with us Sosamma Samuel-Burnett, the founder and president of Global Justice. She has over 30 years of experience in human rights advocacy, 15 years of experience as a university professor. Throughout her journey, the focus has always been on educating communities, equipping students and professionals, promoting advocacy organizations, and supporting educational institutions. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service from Georgetown University and a Juris Doctor from the University of Minnesota Law School, specializing in international human rights law and public policy. Her other notable honors include 2018 Dr. John King International Woman of Vision Honoree from Colorado Women of Influence and a nominee for the L'Oreal Women of Worth in 2017 and 18. And in 2019, she was also a nominee for the Martin Luther King Jr. Award in Colorado. We extend a warm welcome to Sosamma.
Thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure to join you today.
It's such a pleasure and honor to know of your work, and it has been it's what has been really inspiring for me was how you have um, promoted your passion for human rights advocacy and also intertwined it so deeply with your faith. So,
Mm.
to kick off our interview, I would like to delve into the pivotal event or the realization that sparked your journey towards advocating for justice and to human rights, deeply rooted in faith, and what led to the establishment of global justice.
Mm. So many good questions in one. I will start by sharing that my faith really came from really having a family that was grounded in faith for generations. And it was a family that taught me the importance of faith in anything and everything we do, whether it's human rights work, whether it's, any other work, whether it's just being a family member or community member. But the pivotal event for me happened when I was quite young. I grew up first in India and then in Canada and then later in the United States. And when I was in Canada, the Canada that I grew up in back in the early 70s was very different than the Canada of today. And there was a great deal of racial discrimination. At that time, people who looked like me were not treated very well in certain pockets of Canada. And I experienced this in a daily basis, with my family, with other people that I knew that were from my community. And then later, I went to the United States, and for the first time in my life, that racial sort of cloud was lifted for a while, and I didn't feel those same experiences. But then for a short while, we went back to Canada. And when I was there, and this is the moment that I think my human rights journey started, I was only about fifth grade, 10 years old, maybe a little bit older. And we would walk to school with a couple of other younger children. And one of them was a little girl who had darker skin, who was about 6 years old at the time. When we were walking, there was a group of other girls that approached from a different racial group that started to pick on this younger girl and was just very, rude and mean to her. And I just remember feeling this wellspring of just, this is not right. This is not appropriate. This is not acceptable. And so then when they pushed that little girl, I stepped in and I pushed back. Now, I'm not advocating for violence and I'm not advocating for sort of physical touch, but in that moment of responding and trying to protect the girl, I looked into the face of these other individuals and I realized something. And that something was that they had fear. And it suddenly made me realize that so much of what we experience in this world of exploitation and all these things are driven by this fear. And as soon as you step forward for justice, it dissipates. And those individuals left. They no longer were able to have the strength to be able to pick on this other girl because they feared justice. They feared what was right. that was a small example, but that was the beginning for me of realizing this is my role. And where my faith stepped in is when I read the Bible, which is, where, I draw my faith perspective. I realized that Jesus was an advocate for the voiceless. And that became the example for me. And this is what I need to be doing. I need to advocate for those who couldn't. In that moment, it was that little girl, but in other contexts, it could be other people. So that became my journey. And then I was always interested in all things international through my experiences and through my family. And so I ended up studying international relations and human rights. And then ultimately in law school, the human rights experience really melded for me. And that became the pathway for my future experiences with global justice, which I'll share more in a moment.
Yeah. And it is so interesting to know that you have been standing up for justice since such a young age. And another thing that I would like to explore is to understand that, so that was just one instance of racism. So, in this world, which is we are constantly plagued by war and terrorism and racism and so many such problems, in such a world, what would your definition of justice be?
Right. Well, you started our interview with a wonderful reference to Micah 6:8. And today I'm actually wearing a t-shirt that summarizes Micah 6:8. Micah 6:8 for me is the best definition of justice because for me, what I realize is justice looks different in a lot of different contexts. And there's different forms of justice. There's criminal justice, social justice, environmental justice. All these things are out there. And it's very difficult for people to capture one definition. But in Micah 6:8, we have what we call biblical justice, and that becomes this umbrella term. And it's not so much defining a noun, it's defining a verb. So it says act justly, walk humbly, and it also says to love mercy, right? And for me, those are the elements of justice. That's the definition of justice. You are actually supposed to do it, not just think about it. You're supposed to love mercy, which is a very difficult concept because that means not only caring about the victim, but also caring about the perpetrator, right? Complicated issue. And then lastly, to realize that walking humbly means that we don't know it all. We don't have it all. Even though I have, in my 54 years, spent most of my time in my life in justice, I can't tell you that I have every definition of justice. I can only share my experiences and I can learn from others' experiences. But when we pursue justice together and humbly do so, we learn. And that's kind of how I pursue that sort of defining element of justice.
It's so interesting to hear that someone being humble enough to say that for you have been working in this cause for more than 30 years, and to have that humility to say that you don't know yet what justice means. It takes a lot of courage because in this world, in social media, it's so easy to have very strong opinions where you are so determined not to move away from the kind of opinions you hold. You are not open to listen to what other people have to say, and kind of update yourself. And it's so refreshing to know that you're still learning, and
Yes.
so another aspect that I would like to explore is so when global in how does global justice in embody the essence of biblical justice?
Mm.
So what are the activities that global justice does, which embodies the essence of biblical justice?
Mm. Well, first of all, we ground our work in biblical principles, but we also work with a wide range of people. So whether you're a Christian or whether you're of any other background or faith or experience, we are open to working with people because our first element in our work is to be collaborative. There is much to do in the realm of justice, and these are very difficult topics. Oftentimes, we're not able to be the experts on all things. So that's where we work with many different people. So there's some guiding principles to our work. Not only do we work both with secular and faith-based community, but we also work across generations. We want to make sure that we're getting input from people who are very seasoned, as well as people who are, emerging leaders. And we want to make sure that we're getting all those perspectives. We have things to learn from everyone. In addition, we work across sectors. So I'm a lawyer, and my background is law and policy. But you know what? There are scientists, there are artists, there are other people in the tech world that also have things that they can offer to the world of justice. So we don't want only law and policy. We want these other areas so that everybody can move toward that. Another area that we try to emphasize is this idea of nonpartisanship. So you said earlier about the example we have on social media where people have very strong views. We want people to have learned perspectives. And so it's not just about opinions, it's about knowledge. And so what we want to do is work across the aisle. So we might have people left, right, and center that we are interacting with because they all have something that we can learn from, but we don't play partisan politics because justice is something above that. It's not a left or right issue, it's an everybody issue. Finally, I'll also say that we have to be an example because I mentioned collaboration earlier. It doesn't come naturally. And so we have to demonstrate that collaboration. So when we do our work, we try to work with other groups. And so if we're working on the issue, let's say human trafficking, we'll collaborate with other human trafficking organizations that really are knowledgeable. And so we can demonstrate how we can move that pendulum by doing that. And we also have to be ethical. So as much as we talk about biblical justice, how we do our work says as much about us as what we do, right? So if we are doing things fairly and with caring and consideration, TAL is very much devoted to kindness and goodness. Those are important qualities in our work. You'd be amazed at how many advocacy groups might not always be ethical. So we want to make sure that we're demonstrating the best way to do things as much as we're trying to accomplish things.
Yeah. And for me, I'm also interested to know how do you assess the impact of whatever initiatives that have been taken by global justice?
Yeah,
And
that's a great question, and one that is a complex for us. Global is not a direct service organization. We are a resource. So we're kind of like a large library of information and contacts and connections. And that is really hard to measure sometimes because it's not like when you are, let's say we were a food bank and we could say we've given out X amount of food in a year, right? That's not quite how we operate, but how we measure success or progress or just impact is by looking at trends in what we are doing. So, for example, we teach many courses to students of different ages. If those students come back to us with feedback about that particular course, that's wonderful. But if those same students then use that information to then go on to work with nonprofit organizations or pursue research projects or do other types of things that started with information that we provided, that's a measure of success for us. We also, host many events. Some of our events are small, intimate events. We have a cultural tea every month where we talk about different countries, but we also do larger forums. So we'll look at how that event impacted the people coming, not just the numbers of people, but what was their experience? What did they do with that? Sometimes they'll go on to share with someone else and invite someone else to the next forum. March 9th, for example, we have something we call Women Empowering Women. And that's something we've done for 7 years. And we love seeing the range of people that come into that. And when we see new people come in, that's a sign of positivity for us. That means more people are interested, engaged. So for us, it's really about how does the ripple happen? So if we drop that little, pebble into the water, what is that ripple? What are the sort of the next things that happen after we research or write or teach or, host an event?
it is what I find interesting in this is that just by creating a resource, you're already making it a very inclusive space because you're welcoming everyone to come and understand what is that they can contribute. And I also like what you said about earlier when you had shared that. You being an advocate and advocating for human rights is one thing, but we are all responsible, be it what profession we belong to advocate for human rights. And I'm so happy to hear that there are resources available through which we can learn and also be a part of this movement.
Absolutely. And, that is what we want to provide. That is our purpose. So, a few of those resources that can help various people is, every day we do something called Global News, where we kind of compile the key international highlights of the day. And that comes from multiple different news sources. And what we do is just direct people to, these news sources so they can learn. And that's a simple thing. You can get onto our website or get onto social media and see those quick headlines, and we have found that that's been helpful to lots of people in different sectors, whether it's education or health or whatever it might be. Another resource is the Clearinghouse. And so the Clearinghouse is lots of different information about 24 different topics, ranging from the arts all the way to war and peace. And what we do is encourage students and professionals to visit. So let's say you're interested in seeing how you can help the issue of poverty. Well, you can go and learn about what poverty looks like, what organizations are working on that issue, and that clearinghouse is useful. We provide a commentary section where periodically we bring experts in to speak on various topics. And so they will write and share their views. And we try to keep it as neutral as we can so that people are learning and not being triggered by, like we talked about earlier, political positions. Finally, we mentioned that we teach. So we work with a number of different universities and we provide courses, and oftentimes we teach them. But then these events are something broader based where we have a chance to invite the community. And not all the events are here in Colorado where we're based. Sometimes we take it to other locations like California or Washington, D.C. And oftentimes we're online. So we have a chance for many people to connect. So the idea is no matter where you are, no matter what your profession, you can connect and you can access the information that we can provide.
I like how you're referring to the word community over and over again, and I understand that it comes from when you are an expat. There is a deep sense of finding a community for yourself within you, and I can see that this organization is providing a safe space in educating and also giving a feeling of community through these events and all the things that you have been doing in various colleges and providing a sense of community for people all around. And I feel that's very impactful. And yeah, and there is another thing that I wanted to ask that is that what are the challenges that you have faced while working in this field of human rights and justice?
Mm.
And could you elaborate some of the experiences that you have faced?
Sure. So there are many challenges. And I think the first challenge is as a human rights advocate, you have to have a long range view. And when I mean long range, I don't mean just even our lifetime, it means many lifetimes, generations. These are issues that don't get resolved quickly. And we live in a world right now where people want quick fixes. But when you're dealing with issues that are so big, like, human trafficking, for example, we can't necessarily expect that we're going to be able to resolve that. And that's challenging, but we can commit to moving it forward so that we can make progress. And so our goal is always to try to create progress and then pass on to the next generation so that they pick up the torch and continue that work. That's not easy. That's challenging because not only does it mean that you're in the trenches trying to work, but you're also trying to prepare the next group that's going to do that. And that's not an easy process, but we have to be committed to that from generation to generation. The second challenge is, as a nonprofit, there's always limited resources to do all the things that we do. And given what we are and how we do our work, we have to provide many things in many different circles. And that's difficult without the adequate resources. And so it's really making sure that we have a really strong group of people and mostly individuals who can come in and say, okay, we believe in what you're doing and we want to support that work. So that's a constant for any nonprofit. Another area of challenge is just this idea of what we talked about, justice. Justice can be highly politicized, as we talked about,
Yes.
but justice also can be very personal. And so for some people, they might want to focus on a particular issue and not something else. And that's perfectly fine. People can work on one issue. But for some people, justice seems so overwhelming that they don't even pick the issue. They end up saying, oh, I can't do anything about this. I'm going to just step away. And I would say to them, every drop in the bucket fills a bucket. right? And so it does not matter what the scale of what you do for justice. It really is that you do something, and everybody's something is going to be different. But that can be challenging to encourage people to realize that what you have to offer is enough. And then if someone else can offer something else or even something more, that's great too. So these are just some of the examples of ways that we have to struggle a little bit, in terms of being able to do our work. But we have to realize that all good things require some level of struggle. And so if these struggles allow us to pursue justice and to help make that progress, then it's worth it.
And with that, I remember a beautiful anecdote you had given in one of your speeches, and you had referred to struggles in justice as mountains,
Mm-hmm.
and you have political mountains and economic mountains. And the interesting thing is that in this world, it's very difficult to, not care about things. Because we are exploded with a lot of news, and we are surrounded with a lot of doomsday scrolling that happens throughout the day. So it's really better to do something about one particular issue that is deeply personal to us rather than not getting involved at all.
Right,
So that's
right.
that's a
Right, and I so appreciate you sharing about the mountains. At Global, we use mountains as this analogy for pursuing justice, and we're located in Colorado. So a lot of times people think, oh, they have these beautiful mountains because they're in Colorado. Well, that's partly true, but it is really an example to us of what it means to pursue justice. When you climb a mountain, you have to prepare. When you climb a mountain, you have to struggle. And sometimes you don't even make it to the summit for a number of reasons, right? But it's this idea that you tried and that you challenged yourself. And then if you do make it to the summit, oh, what an incredible experience that is. And that's worth all the challenge of climbing. And so we really appreciate you sharing that.
So we wind up this episode with one last question. And what I would like to know is, so what would be your advice for organizations which are similar to Global Justice, which are also working towards human rights advocacy across the globe? So
Mm,
what would your advice to be to them, and what would your guidance for them be?
mhm. I would share the same thing that we share with our own work. So, first is to think ethically. What are you doing and how are you doing it? How can you do it well? And how can you be an example to others? So, it's not just performance, it's about the whole process of how you're doing it. I think it's important for everyone that is working in this space to be accountable and transparent in that work that they're doing so that people can respect that. The second piece is something that we talked about already, collaboration. Especially in the advocacy world, there's a tendency to be siloed because not for bad reasons. Sometimes it's just simply they're so overwhelmed with their own work. But the point is that we can do so much more together. And there's a sort of an African proverb that I've shared often where we say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And I would say that for our advocacy community, we really want to make sure that we're working together. These issues are too big otherwise. And finally, to be creative. That's another element of our work here at Global. The world is always changing. Even social media is changing. Things are always going to change around us. How well can we adapt to those changes? How can we be creative in how we not only adapt but also respond? And I think that makes a huge difference for any organization to look creatively. And creativity is not just from the arts. You can be a techie and be very creative, right? So I want to make sure that we're all thinking in those terms of ethics, collaboration, and creativity to be more effective.
Yeah. And I said it was the last question, but I would like to add one more, which is to talk about another vertical, the Touch a Life Foundation, which is TAL Talks, and
Yeah.
you had featured in it. And what do you feel about getting such a platform to showcase your work, to tell to people about your work, and how important is it for nonprofits to get that kind of a leverage and that kind of a platform?
Well, I want to start by just thanking the Touch of Life Foundation, not only for TAL Talks, but also even this interview. I think one of the things that TAL is doing is creating those platforms because you recognize that many organizations, even if they're doing good work, there are lots of people who don't know about them. right? Lots of people who have no idea that this work is happening. And so by providing these platforms, it gives a chance to give exposure. We have a very similar heartbeat in the sense that ultimately what we want is for these organizations to be able to do their work better, right? To reach more people, have more impact. And so having a platform like this, I think, is very useful because it reaches new communities or new individuals that may otherwise not have known. And I think that that goes a long way in helping support, the advocacy community.
Yeah. That's really beautiful, and you have given such um, a very good perspective, and so many ideas related to justice and what it could mean for us and what we can do about it. And thank you so much for being a part of this interview. And this is the inaugural episode of Voices of Impact, and so we are so happy to have you as our first guest.
Well,
And
well, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful host, and thanks so much to Touch a Life Foundation.
So, and to our listeners, so thank you for tuning in to today's episode. And that's all for today. And we wish you a joyful day ahead. And remember to stay tuned to TALRadio for more inspiring content. Signing off, your host for the day, Pavithra Krishnakumar. So, thank you so much for today's episode. And this is my first time that I'm doing an interview. And so you put me at ease. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, you did wonderfully. I didn't even realize this was the inaugural. So how wonderful is that? And thank you so much. You were excellent, and I just appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for putting me at ease. And so happy to interview
Uh,
you.
well, you're
And
my careless sister, so I'm so
yes,
glad for that. All right. We hope to
yeah,
touch
yeah,
base again soon. Take care. Have a
yeah.
wonderful day.
You
Okay.
too. Take care.
All
Have,
right.
have a wonderful day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Susuma. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode. That's all for today's episode. We wish you a joyful day ahead and remember to stay tuned to Tal Radio for more inspiring content. Next week, at the same time, we'll be coming with another change maker to make your day. Signing off, your host for the day, Pavithra Krishnakumar.